Good morning everybody and welcome to this tutorial on quantum information systems. The outline of the talk is as follows. We start with a discussion on Young's double slit experiment. Then we come to discussion of quantum states, measures of quantum information, qubits, quantum gates and algorithms, De Vincenzo criteria for physical realization of quantum computers, challenges before quantum information processing, and how the DI Quantum Nanosystem Center is trying to overcome these challenges. We start our discussion on Young's double slit experiment with a quote by Richard Feynman. He said, "We cannot make the mystery go away by explaining how it works. We will just tell you how it works." So it's tough explaining that. This is the Young's double slit experiment. Light is made to fall on a slit here, and we have another two slits here. So the first slit is here and the second and third slits are here. So the observing screen pattern looks as follows. Now we have the question that is light a wave or a particle? So Young's double slit pattern tries to answer that, the dual nature of light as a wave and a particle. If you have the right slit open, this first slit is always open. At the second level, suppose only the right slit is open. The observing screen pattern comes like this. You get a cone like this. If the left slit is open, you get something like this. So even if light is like a classical object, like a bullet, you would get the same pattern based on probabilities. But what is going to happen if both the slits are open? Then you get these two light cones intersecting. If we assume light is a particle, then the probability distribution says that we should get the pattern like this. If we assume light is a wave, then we should get this based on interference. What we get is actually what corresponds to the wave theory. So Young's double slit pattern points to light as a wave. But there are other experiments like photoelectric effect which point to light as a particle. So light has a dual nature. It is a wave as well as a particle. So we come to this double slit experiment with photons. We have a photon source and we have these two slits here. In front of each slit we have got three detectors. Our assumptions are that a photon will pass through one of the two slits, either one or two. And we have got these three measuring devices for the first slit, another three for the second one. So our assumptions are a photon will pass through one of the two slits. Each slit has a 50% chance of the photons passing through it. To the right of each slit, there are three measuring devices. These are for the first one, these three are for the second one. One is common. It is assumed that it takes one time click to go from the laser to the wall and one time click to go from the wall to the measuring devices. So this is the weighted graph for the double slit experiment. These are labeled as nodes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you look here, from 0 to 1, there is a probability of half. Again, from 0 to 2, there is a probability of half. So these two coefficients are 1 by root 2 and 1 by root 2. Similarly, the probabilities for going from 1 to 3, 4, and 5 are 1 by 3 each. So these are all the cubic roots of unity. And so are these. We have got 1 by root 2 here and cubic roots of unity on these three and these three. So the adjacency matrix P for photons of this graph is as follows. If you have to go from 0 to 1, there is a probability of 1 by 2. 0 to 2, again 1 by root 2. And for the rest of the three, from 1 to 3, 4, 5, it is cubic root of unity. From 2 to 5, 6, 7, again cubic root of unity. So the matrix is not unitary as we have not placed all the arrows in our graph. The reason is there are many more possible ways the photon can travel in a real life physical situation. We have imagined it can go take only one of two or three paths. In particular, the photon might travel from right to left also. There's a small probability it might do that. So the diagram and matrix would become too complicated if we put in all the transitions. The modulus squared of the P matrix corresponds perfectly to the probability distribution. For going from 0 to 1 and 0 to 2, there's a probability of half each. For going from 1 to 3, 4, 5, we have 1 by 3 each. For going from 2 to 5, 6, 7, we have got a probability of 1 by 3 again. So this is the adjacency matrix after two time clicks. So P square comes out as follows. In fact, we chose our complex number so that mod Pij square would be equal to the probability of a real life physical object. This means that nothing strange happens after one time click. What it means is the first time click is simply going from the photon source to the wall. But let us see what happens in the next one. The modulus squared of the P matrix is exactly the same as that of a classical object, like a bullet being fired instead of photons. If we fire bullets from two slits, there is a 50% chance that the bullet will pass to the first slit or the second slit. So if light is passing like a particle, we get exactly the same distribution. But there's an interesting element which is P50 here, which is 0. Let us see what's interesting about that. We can see that to go from 0 to 5, there are two paths, 0 to 1 and 1 to 5, and 0 to 2 and 2 to 5. But still the probability of going from 0 to 5 is 0. With a photon that follows the laws of quantum mechanics, the complex numbers are added as opposed to their probabilities. So the probability of going from 0 to 5 is 0. In other words, although there are two ways of a photons going from vertex 0 to vertex 5, there will be no photon at vertex 5 because the complex numbers add up to 0. So there's a simple explanation physicists have had since a long time, that's interference. A familiar observation such as two pebbles thrown into a pool of water will convince us that waves interfere. So double slit experiment points to the wave nature of light. But at the same time, there are other experiments like the photoelectric effect which point towards a different direction. Light is absorbed and emitted in discrete quantities or photons. So that's a bundle of energy, and it is as if light and matter has a double nature. On some occasions, it acts as a beam of particles, and at other times, it acts like a wave. We proceed to some measures of information or entropy. The crux of information theory is the measure of information. Shannon took a hint from classical thermodynamics and decided to relate the information content with the probabilities of a message. The entropy is a measure of the uncertainty of a single random variable x before it is observed. So the Shannon entropy of a source with probability distribution pi is defined as Hs is minus sigma pi log to the base 2 pi. This is Shannon's entropy. For quantum information, we generally deal with von Neumann entropy. There is a quantum analog of entropy known as von Neumann entropy. Just as Shannon entropy measures the amount of order in a classical system, von Neumann entropy gauges order in a given quantum system. The von Neumann entropy for a quantum source is represented by the density operator. HV is minus sigma lambda log 2 lambda, where lambda 1, lambda 2, dot dot lambda n are the eigenvalues of D. So we come to the need of distinct states. Suppose Alice is transmitting some information to Bob, and assume that Alice has chosen her quantum symbols or alphabets as a set of normalized states, ket W1, ket W2, dot dot ket Wn. Alice does not have to choose an orthogonal set of states, they simply need to be distinct. They don't need to be like X, Y, Z orthogonal. They have to be distinct. If she wishes to notify Bob, she can choose 4 normalized states in some state space. Even the single qubit space has got great room, as there are infinitely many distinct qubits. For example, A is ket 0, B is ket 1, C is ket 0 plus 1 by root 2, D is ket 0 minus ket 1 by root 2. You can have infinitely many such cases, but they have to be distinct. So ket C and ket D should not be the same. So this is the definition of the density operator. Basically, it is the projection of ket V onto ket Wi. The length of the projection is the scalar product Wi V, using the fact that all Wi's are normalized. The probability distribution should sum to 1. We take an example. Assume Alice has a quantum alphabet consisting of just these two. Ket W1 is 0, ket 0 plus ket 1 by root 2, and ket W2 is 0. Alice sends ket W1 with frequency 1 by 3 and W2 with 2 by 3. Bob uses the standard basis ket 0 and ket 1 for his measurements. Their bases can be different. So the density operator is computed as D, and you can write down the density matrix in the standard basis also. So these are the 4 coefficients of the density matrix: 5 by 6, 1 by 6, 1 by 6, and 1 by 6. We carry this forward. So this is the density matrix. Now you can calculate these two terms as 5 by 6 and 1 by 6 by matrix multiplication, and we can calculate Shannon entropy with respect to this basis. Hs is minus 1 by 6 log to 1 by 6 minus 5 by 6 log to 5 by 6, which comes out as 0.65. We continue from example 1 with the same density matrix. This time we find the von Neumann entropy and verify that it is equal to Shannon's entropy when calculated with respect to the orthonormal basis of eigenvectors of D. The matrix D has eigenvalues given by lambda 1 is 0.1273, lambda 2 is 0.8727. So you get the normalized eigenvectors. The von Neumann entropy of D is calculated as HVD, which comes out as 0.55. In fact, you can verify that von Neumann's entropy is identical to Shannon's entropy when calculated with respect to the orthonormal basis of eigenvectors of D. In fact, these two sum up to 1, and both eigenvalues are positive, as befits true probabilities. Next, we come to something about quantum bits. A qubit can be in a state other than just 0 or 1. It can be in a superposition of both. So that is the crux of quantum information. Ket psi is alpha ket 0 plus beta ket 1. This is the matrix representation of the qubit, alpha beta. So the surprising thing about qubits is we can compute with a superposition. So for example, if we add two 4-qubit quantum registers, we add all 16 combinations of register 1 and all 16 combinations of register 2 to get all 256 answers simultaneously. This is where the power of quantum computing comes from. A classical computer would require 256 steps for this. Here we get them in one shot. In fact, this result is, if you have 5 qubits, then you get 2 to the power 5, 32 combinations together. So we discussed some quantum gates. This is a quantum NOT gate. An ordinary NOT gate converts a 0 to a 1 and a 1 to a 0. A quantum NOT gate works on superposition of alpha ket 0 plus beta ket 1. You get alpha ket 1 plus beta ket 0. This is the matrix representation of the quantum NOT gate 0, 1, 1, 0. If you have this as the input and you pass it through a NOT gate and you multiply it with this matrix, you end up with beta alpha. So it becomes alpha 1 plus beta 0. Next you have a quantum Z gate. It leaves ket 0 unchanged and changes the sign of ket 1 to minus ket 1. So if you have alpha 0 plus beta 1, you pass it through a Z gate, you end up with alpha ket 0 minus beta 1. This is the matrix representation of the Z gate. And you can verify in both cases, Z ket 0 is ket 0, Z ket 1 is minus ket 1. A Hadamard gate converts a 0 to a 0 plus 1 by root 2, 1 to 0 minus 1 by root 2. So if you have a superposition alpha 0 plus beta ket 1, you get alpha ket 0 plus ket 1 by root 2 plus beta ket 0 minus ket 1 by root 2, which is given as H. In fact, you can continue this for various inputs. If the input is 0, you end up with 0 plus 1 by root 2, 1 is 0 minus 1 by root 2. A superposition of both gives alpha plus beta by root 2 ket 0 plus alpha minus beta by root 2 ket 1. This can be rearranged. If you give 0 plus 1 by root 2, you end up back with a 0. And if you give 0 minus 1 by root 2, you end up back with a 1. These are the famous Pauli matrices, sigma I, sigma X, sigma Y and sigma Z. These are used in various applications such as quantum teleportation, which we'll see later. Then you have a control NOT gate. Here the top qubit is called as the control qubit. The bottom qubit is the target qubit. The qubits are represented as straight lines. So if the top qubit, control qubit is 0, nothing happens to the target qubit. But if the control qubit is 1, the target qubit is flipped. So if the input state is 0, 0, the control qubit is 0, target qubit remains 0. If it is 0, 1, it stays that way, 0, 1 is 0, 1. Control qubit is 1, the target qubit is flipped. The 0 becomes a 1. If the control qubit is 1, the target qubit here is 1, it is flipped back to 0. So it operates only if the control qubit is a 1. This is the CNOT gate matrix for that. And now it's a 4 by 4 matrix. You can verify that it indeed gives us the CNOT gate operation. This is a swap gate. It can be made using CNOT gates, but this is a comfortable representation for that. It basically swaps the 2 qubits. So if the input is AB, you end up with BA. That's the action of a swap gate. Its truth table. This is the Toffoli gate, controlled, control not. The first 2 qubits are the control qubits. Now you've got 2 control qubits, C1, C2. If both of them are 1, the target qubit is flipped. Otherwise, nothing happens. The third is the target bit, which is inverted only if both the control bits are 1. Else it is left unchanged. These are the Bell states or the EPR states. These are used especially in quantum teleportation. What is surprising about them is that whatever you do with one, the same operation or similar operation is reflected on the other. For example, if I have got 2 qubits which are entangled and I keep one here and I teleport one to say the United States or even half a universe away, if I do some operation on this qubit, even though there is no means of physical communication between the two, still there is something in the other qubit which is changed and which can be measured. So if the input is ket 0, 0 to this circuit, you end up with the first Bell entangled state beta 0, 0, which is 0, 0 plus 1, 1 by root 2. There are no single qubit gates ket A and ket B such that ket psi is ket A, ket B. You can't in a way factorize these. Similarly, ket 0, 1 gives rise to this, 1, 0 gives rise to this, 1, 1 gives rise to the fourth. These are the 4 Bell entangled states. In fact, Einstein called it spooky action at a distance because there is no means of communication between them. Still, if I measure the first qubit as 0, I am sure to get the second one also as 0, though they may be a world apart. Next we come to quantum teleportation. Suppose Alice and Bob are 2 friends who met a long time ago. Before they separated, they generated a Bell state and each one of them took 1 qubit of the EPR pair. However, after several years, Alice wants to send a qubit ket psi to Bob. However, she can send only classical information to Bob. The problems before Alice are several. First, she does not know the state of the qubit ket psi. Moreover, if she tries to determine the state ket psi, describing it precisely takes an infinite amount of information, since ket psi takes values in a continuous space. So even if she determines ket psi, it would take infinite time for Alice to describe the state to Bob over the conventional channel. Second, she can communicate only over a classical communication channel with Bob. She has to send quantum information, but she's got just a classical communication channel. Here you can see this cat chi is the information Alice wants to get across to Bob. They have a shared entangled Bell state beta 0, 0. So this is the circuit for quantum teleportation. There is a CNOT gate followed by a Hadamard gate followed by 2 measurements. And then there are some operations which need to be done. Cat chi 0 is simply cat chi beta 0, 0. Cat chi 1 is this after the operation of CNOT gate. Cat chi 2 is after the operation of the Hadamard gate. Here there are 4 terms, cat 0, 0, alpha 0 plus beta 1, cat 0, 1, cat 1, 0, cat 1, 1. We are performing a measurement here. Depending on the result of measurement, if the measurement result is 0, 0, we end up with alpha cat 0 plus beta cat 1 as the output here. If it is 0, 1, we end up with this. If it is 1, 0, we end up with this. If it is 1, 1, we end up with this. So basically this is what it is. Alice measures 0, 0, you end up with cat chi. If Alice measures 0, 1, you end up with something which is similar, beta cat 0 plus alpha cat 1. So you need to apply a poly X gate. Similarly, if Alice measures 1, 0, you have to apply a poly Z gate. Alice measures 1, 1, you have to apply a poly X gate and then a poly Z gate. Some interesting facts about quantum teleportation. Faster than light transfer of quantum information is not possible, though through teleportation, as the classical communication channel is still involved in between, which prohibits speeds faster than light. It might appear at first glance that a copy of the quantum state has been teleported. However, it is not so. It is illusory since after teleportation, only Bob has his qubit in the state cat chi and the original qubit ends up in one of the computation basis states cat 0 or cat 1. So it is not that a copy has been sent, the original information has been sent. It emphasizes the interchangeability of different resources in quantum mechanics, showing that one shared EPR pair along with 2 bits of classical communication is a resource that is at least equal to 1 qubit of communication. This is the quantum entanglement setup used to verify these results at NASA. We can also have quantum communication. It is very, very secure because if there is an eavesdropper, Eve tries to intercept the message between Alice and Bob. She ends up garbling it in such a way that Bob can always detect that something has gone wrong. So any eavesdropping is detected by an error in the check bits. Alice and Bob will always be able to discover that Eve has been listening to the line. This is just an example of the setup at Geneva which has been used to verify quantum communication. There are 2 killer algorithms of quantum computing. The first is Shor's factoring algorithm and the other is Grover's search algorithm. Factoring is at the heart of cybersecurity. When you do transactions on your credit card, the basis of security is that you have one part of the factor of a very large number. The bank has the other part. When you send your part across, it verifies that indeed the multiplication is this. But suppose I ask you to solve the reverse problem, that question mark into question mark is 29083. It's hard to solve this. It is easy the one way, that 9 into 4 is 36, but it's reverse the other way around. So Shor has reduced the factoring problem to order finding. So this is basically the mathematics of it. I won't get into the details. You choose a number x and find out XR mod n and see what is the period of this. The period comes out as 6, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 11 and so on. So the order is seen to be 6. So we can evaluate 7 as indeed a factor, and so you can always find the other factor. So this is the use of quantum. The power of quantum computers for order finding comes in because now to make this table, you can make it in one shot because this XR mod n operation is done for all these states together by a quantum computer. If you do it using a classical computer, you will need to make this table individually in each step for each column. Next, you've got Grover's search algorithm. It searches an unstructured database of size n is O root n. Suppose you've got a telephone directory of 10,000 names which are not alphabetical. They are in just jumbled order. And you try to find someone's name. If you are lucky, it might be the first one. If you are unlucky, it might be the last one. So on an average, you'll need n by 2 lookups. But Grover's algorithm does it in operation root n. So in 100 lookups, you can come to that. But you need a quantum register for that. So he's used the concept of oracle and Grover search. The way I prefer to explain it is by a geometric explanation. This is, suppose there are m states which match your query and there are a total of n states. So n minus m states don't match your query. So this is your initial state, cat chi. So Grover's oracle first reflects it about cat alpha and then reflects 2 about 1. So 2 reflections equivalent to a rotation. You end up in the final state g cat chi. So slowly and slowly you are operated in every Grover's iteration towards your answer, which is cat beta. So each Grover iteration is a rotation by some angle theta, which is given as this. Next we come to something more concrete, which is physical realization of quantum computers. In principle, a large-scale quantum computer can be built using primitives which have been realized by a controllable quantum system, provided the physical system meets the following requirements spelled out by DiVincenzo at IBM Research Labs. In fact, we have Graham Smith there, here with us from the same group. So DiVincenzo has spelled out 7 criteria. The first is a scalable physics system with well-characterized qubits. Second is the ability to initialize the state of the qubits to a simple fiducial state. Third, long decoherence times much longer than the gate operation time. Fourth, a universal set of gates which is experimentally feasible. Fifth, a quantum specific measurement capability. Sixth and 7 are more important from the viewpoint of quantum communication rather than computation. So it is the ability to interconvert stationary and flying qubits. And 7th is the ability to faithfully transmit flying qubits between specified locations. This is a summary of the DiVincenzo criteria and the various approaches we are being tried, such as trapped ion, NMR, neutral atom, cavity QED, optical, solid state, superconducting. So A is a potentially viable approach which has achieved sufficient proof of principle. B is a potentially viable approach has been proposed, but there has not been sufficient proof of principle. C is no viable approach is known. So the various quantum computing approaches have been compared vis-a-vis these quantum computation criteria as spelled out by DiVincenzo and the quantum network ability criteria 6 and 7 also. These are the 7 DiVincenzo criteria. So there are several challenges before quantum information processing before we have quantum computers on our desktops. Identification of the best suitable physical system which allows for scalability, coherence, and fast implementation of QIP. Engineering and control of quantum mechanical systems far beyond anything achieved so far. Development of a computer architecture taking into account quantum mechanical features. Development of interfacing and networking techniques for quantum computers. Investigation and development of quantum algorithms and protocols. Transfer of academic knowledge about the control and measurement of quantum systems to industry, and thus acquisition of industrial support and interest for developing and providing quantum systems. At Dalbagh, we have the Quantum and Nano Computing Virtual Center set up under aegis of the Ministry of Human Resource Development, National Mission on Education through Information and Communication Technology. Our partners are, of course, DI is there, IIT Kanpur, IIT Delhi, and IIT Madras. So the objectives are to bring together through ICT the complementary research strengths of the partnering groups spread all over the country. Then to utilize this distance learning technologies such as video conferencing, webcasts, etc., and provide opportunities to young scientists and researchers at any place and time for inclusive growth. Then dissemination of this knowledge through ICT by organization of seminars and an annual winter school on quantum and nano computing systems. This is the 2009 version of the same. We've also tried to develop a small roadmap for quantum computing. What is the background so far? We've organized several workshops like SCON 2007, Conclave 2007, Kansas 2008 was the last version of school, and so on. So ultimately, we hope to realize a quantum computer in India. We have got collaboration, international partners, University of Waterloo, Michigan State University. We have Professor Boyer, Dr. Carlo, and Professor Mahanti with us, MIT, University of Maryland, College Park, Jonathan Simon will be joining us shortly, IBM Research Labs, Watson Research Center, we have Graham Smith with us today, then Cambridge University, Queensland University of Technology, national partners, IIT Delhi, IIT Kanpur, IIT Madras, Institute of Mathematical Sciences, Chennai, ISC Bangalore, TIFR Mumbai, IIT Bombay. In fact, we are trying to develop a information or computation, quantum information or computation roadmap, 3-year goals, 5-year goals, 10-year goals, and so on. So we are trying to deliver SQUID-based quantum computing device prototypes. And another focus is unified modeling theory for information processing circuits. You will hear more about this in a talk by Mrs. Dayalpari Srivastava on December 17th. There's another tutorial on that. Then whatever we'll set up, we are trying to put up web-based interfaces for using these devices at National Hub from remote locations. And of course, then we have got further 5-year goals. These are based more on the European roadmap, but today we are meeting to chart out an Indian roadmap. Today evening we are meeting and discuss among the invited speakers how best we can go about it. So these are some 5-year objectives. Then 10-year goals, quantum algorithms with up to 50 qubits, quantum simulation of key problems in science, convergence and unification attempts for theory of everything rather than, in fact, we are trying to develop a theory of many things rather than a theory of everything. We have got already classroom interaction between our partner institutes, DI, IIT Kanpur, University of Waterloo, Michigan State University. We have got regular webcasts and video lectures between them. The first workshop we organized on the subject was SQUAN 2007, Indo-US workshop that was supported by the Indo-US Science and Technology Forum. The next one was Quantum Nano Conclave, which was organized. Again, we had speakers from MIT, IIT Kanpur, University of Waterloo, Then the last edition of this school had speakers from IIT Delhi, IISc Bangalore, IBM Research, University of Waterloo, Michigan State University, and so on. We have also got MOUs between our partner institutes, between DI, IIT Delhi, IIT Kanpur, University of Waterloo, and University of Maryland College Park, and we've also now signed one with TIFR Mumbai. In fact, the MOU was also signed through video conferencing between DI and University of Waterloo. We've authored some books together. The need of the hour is an Indian roadmap on quantum computation or information. Love Grover, the famous inventor of Grover search algorithm, said, having missed the boat in the Silicon Revolution in the 70s and 80s, India should make every attempt not to let it happen again, even if it means spending some resources on technologies like quantum computing, which are speculative but hold tremendous potential. United States has its own roadmap developed in 2004 for Quantum Information Science and Technology Research Panel, ARDA. Europe also has its own roadmap. Canada has a consortium called as Quantum Works Canada, which is trying to put together the efforts by various universities so that they have a common roadmap. This is a comparison of the funding of quantum computation or information in various countries. This is where India stands. We're not close to these, but we're better than these other countries. In fact, we can do better. At DI, we have just acquired superconducting quantum interference devices, SQUID-based devices. So these are we got them just last week. They have to be installed in pulse tube coolers and proposed to be utilized as qubits. And in fact, whatever we achieve will be made available for online use through web interface of the DI Virtual Labs project. So whatever we do will not be confined here. We will try to open it up for use of everybody.
I always ask people that are talking about quantum computing, when do you think one will actually be able to do significant quantum computing?
In our roadmap, sir, after 3 years, we hope we can get some prototypes which we can claim to call quantum computers. But another 10 years, I think we'll have something which we can say is truly a quantum computer. Let's hope it's earlier than that.
Okay, well, I guess that's consistent with what Hans Mui, of course, he's doing the superconducting implementation of that. I think that's what he would say as well. So, good.
Right. I think we look forward to your talk on how advances in science are made. That will inspire us to develop them even faster.
I would hope so, but I doubt it.
Thank you. Thank you. And the speaker is extremely grateful to revered Professor Satsangi, Chairman Advisory Committee on Education, Advisory Committee on Education, Dalbagh, for introduction to the field.